giving you full disclosure. This is the Debriefer.
Hello, I'm Donna Ballman. I'm a lawyer here in sunny South Florida and author of The Writer's Guide to the Courtroom and Stand Up for Yourself Without Getting Fired, here with Peter Cox, London literary agent extraordinaire. We'll be discussing major legal issues in the headlines that impact the writing and publishing business. This week we'll be talking about whether a Supreme Court nominee is a plagiarist, why some hackers should use libraries more, a demonologist suing Warner Brothers, a gender-neutral pronoun for journalists, and lots of people claiming other people stole their ideas. You liked the demonologist, did you, Peter?
Yes, I do, actually. There's always something interesting happening, isn't it? If it's not Donald Trump. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to mention that. It's a demonologist.
No, I
fantastic.
thought we were going to get through without talking about him. Yes.
Can't do that.
But first, the first story. Peter, do you think a plagiarist should be allowed to decide copyright cases?
Well, that's a loaded question. I know where you're coming from, young lady. You are, you're a Democrat through and through. Cut you and do you not bleed democratic blood. And you're referring to Neil Gorsuch, who it's a typical Andy Warhol thing. He's going to be famous for about 15 seconds. This is going to blow up and it's going to blow down again. And
well,
I don't
unless
know.
he's a Supreme Court justice, in which case he's going to be plaguing us for a long time.
I mean, you might be able to, but I couldn't name any of the other Supreme Court justices. He's quite young.
I could, but
He's only 49. He doesn't look it. He looks about 80. But what's all this about then?
Well, so, I mean, it looks like he is going to be on the Supreme Court. And they have, clear majority. They've taken the nuclear option, so Democrats don't have much ability to stop it from going through. But Neil Gorsuch is nominated for the Supreme Court. He's going through the confirmation process right now. And the allegation, which has been done by Politico and BuzzFeed, is that sections of his book called The Future of Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia, and an article that he published in the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy were plagiarized. And they show excerpts that, he basically, he didn't obviously do word for word. He's smarter than that. But there are excerpts where he quoted things that were very, very similar. And I have to say, even though I'm a Democrat through and through, I'm looking at like one of the comparisons. And I think that it's a stretch. For instance, they give a passage that he wrote describing someone who had left his second wife after she'd undergone surgery for breast cancer, and during the divorce, that the wife alleged that when he purported to help her mother commit suicide, the death wasn't consensual. And he's describing this, and yes, it's very similar to the wording of another story or another article, but how many ways can you describe that set of facts? I think that, when you're talking facts as opposed to ideas, I think sometimes it's very difficult to use different words when the facts are the facts.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. I was thinking that too. He doesn't attribute. If he attributed, I don't think there'd be so much of a problem. But he's not attributing. So I'm looking at typical sentence here. So this is the original sentence, quote, in 1989, he left his second wife, Anne Wickett, shortly after she had undergone surgery for breast cancer, full stop. And this is Gorsuch's version, unattributed, of course. In 1989, Humphrey left his second wife, Anne Wickett, soon after she had undergone surgery for breast cancer. Okay, so he has slightly changed that. It's very clear to everyone, even a Supreme Court justice, that sentence has been lifted. No question about that. Any reasonable-minded person would say, yeah, that's been lifted. The thing is, how else, bearing in mind that you have to be accurate here, and you're trying to, it's almost like scientific writing. You've got to, if you're rephrasing it, if you're paraphrasing it, there's always the danger you can actually change the meaning of the words. So you don't want to do that. The obvious solution to me would be to put it in quotation marks and attribute the source, or at the very least, attribute the source. So that if anybody does turn around later and say to you, well, you just lifted that, you say, actually, no, the source is there, I don't know. It's difficult. I got to say, this has happened to me. Some years ago, I remember picking up an American book and looking at it and thinking, that's interesting. Some of those words, I could have written those. And actually, I had written them in a book some years previously. I think it's kind of happened to you as well from what you said on previous shows, Donna. And you start to think to yourself,
Yes.
well, I wanted that information to get out there. That's why I wrote the book. And it is getting out there if other people are sort of, using it. And yet, part of me feels it would have been nice and polite to have been attributed, in a footnote or something, rather than everyone assuming that those are the words of the author. So is it plagiarism? No, I don't think it is out-and-out plagiarism, because we've seen many, many examples of really bad plagiarism over the lifetime of the debriefer. But is it a good thing to do? No, it's not. It's dodgy. It's definitely, morally compromised, in my view.
Yeah, one person calls it heavy patch writing, which is basically borrowing from another work with small alterations and not attributing. So I think that, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable calling that plagiarism, that particular passage, because it's a recitation of facts, and it's very hard to say those particular facts in a different way. I don't know how else you would do it other than summarize, but he should have, given a footnote or something attributing his source. I think, in the argument as well, he attributed the original source that author used instead, and not the secondary source.
That's not quite good enough, because he's not actually using the original source. He's using somebody's summary, condensation, clarification. He is actually using that person's unique take on it, and to that extent it's wrong.
So I think the concern for me is that a guy who has possibly plagiarized, arguably plagiarized, is going to be deciding copyright cases, and it's a concern. The Supreme Court obviously has a major impact on copyright cases, not U.S., but it affects worldwide copyright. So it is a concern. So I think it's something that people should be aware of that's going on. It's an issue. I'm obviously opposed to his confirmation for a lot of reasons other than plagiarism. I'm not sure that this is a great attack, but it's certainly a concern. Now, also concerning is the fact that there apparently have been a series of ransomware attacks on libraries. And I said at the beginning, well, maybe some hackers should go to libraries more often, because what do they think they're going to get from a library? Libraries have no money. They're poorly funded.
Yeah.
They're disappearing. What the heck are they thinking? It's crazy.
Well, ransomware is appearing all over the place, and it's been around for some years. It's a really serious problem. I think this particular library, whereas it's the St. Louis Public Library, did really well, because they survived the ransomware attack, and they're basically up and running again within a day or two. And that proves, beyond any doubt at all, the value of keeping really good backups. And let me just sort of make this a practical piece of advice. If you're not backing up at all, you're an idiot, because you will lose your data. You absolutely will. If you're backing up once a week, once a day to a local hard disk or something, you're also an idiot, because you will lose your data sooner or later to something like this, ransomware. You've got to do two things. First of all, you've got to back up off-site. You can have a local backup as well, but you've got to have an off-site backup. If you think about all the horrible things that could happen, your office or your home could burn down. There could be a flood. There could be all kinds of, it could get broken into, and your stuff could get stolen. Your backup will be vulnerable as much as anything else. That's the first thing to say. Make sure you do back up off-site. But the second thing to say as well, and this is particularly important, I think, with more sophisticated ransomware, is you've got to have a number of different versions of backup. So let's say you do a backup once a week. Keep the last 4, keep the last month, because very often now ransomware is very clever, and it looks around when it infects your system, and it says, okay, these people are backing up. Yes, they are. I'm going to infect that backup quietly. No one will know about it. So your backups, from the date that the ransomware actually invaded your system, which might be well before the time you become aware of it, will also be infected. So don't rely on going back to the last backup, say yesterday's backup or last week's backup. That might be compromised too. It gets really quite complicated, doesn't it?
It does, and it's unfortunate. And we do have to be aware of things like ransomware. So do back up, and that I think is the real lesson of the story, is that the libraries were able to recover. But targeting libraries
I know.
for ransom, it's
I haven't got any money in any case.
Of all, yes, no, just so hackers go somewhere else to big corporations or something. Don't go to the poor little libraries that have no money or they're in enough trouble as they are. And now, Peter, to your favorite story, the demonologist. The demonologist who is suing Warner Brothers, and they're saying that they basically stole the story of their lives for the horror movie The Conjuring.
Well, this is kind of a series of movies and spin-offs and things that I've never really become aware of, but they've made hundreds of millions of dollars. So, of course, where there's a hit, there's a writ, and this is the one. I mean, so many of these, and we're going to talk about another one in a moment, so many of these lawsuits are really very similar, aren't they? They sort of say, well, there was this idea and I had it first, and so you should pay me hundreds of millions of dollars. And almost invariably, these lawsuits are brought in Los Angeles, where the studios happen to be located, and almost invariably they get thrown out in Los Angeles as well.
Yes, and we have a lot of these stories, and I don't like to cover too many of them because they are kind of repetitive, but I thought this was an interesting one because it is a demonologist claiming that it's a
you would think
story,
a demonologist has probably got other recourse. Actually, the last thing they'd be bothered about is the law. I mean, they can do all sorts of dreadful other things, couldn't they? Put a hex on you and you name it, really.
Yes, and all they want is for them to disgorge their profits. So I guess maybe they're getting off lucky if they can actually summon up some demons. Another story of an alleged theft is Black Jesus on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim.
Right.
And an author who created a Black Jesus in 1999 says that they lifted from his story. Apparently he did a story that ended with his Jesus being kicked out of the house to live on the streets. And he says that Black Jesus then picks up the tale 15 years later.
Fine. I came up with the idea at first. No, I don't think he did. I think Jesus has always been rather black, actually, hasn't he? I mean, he's not white.
This is a Black Jesus that curses a lot, drinks booze, lives on the street, and has a friend who's always trying to get rich quick. And this guy says, well, that's my Black Jesus too. So it does sound similar, but again, it's not the idea. It's the expression of the idea. So, is this a fair...
He's trying to get 75 million, apparently. Well, good luck to you, mate. I mean, maybe you did come up with the idea first, but... Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. We keep saying it, don't we? We keep saying it's not the idea. You go around sort of, I've seen it happen all the time. You go around and, try and get people interested and you don't know. You pitch ideas to people and it could be 12 months later, 24 months later, whatever. Just so happens they come up with a similar sort of idea. You're never going to win in court. The most you're going to hope for is a little bit of, as we say in the UK, F-off money. But I don't think you'll really even get that, actually, because it's like almost goes back to ransomware. Once you start paying that sort of money as a corporation, you'll get a reputation pretty quickly as an easy mark. So companies mostly don't, even on the intellectual property front, don't really like to pay that sort of money just to shut somebody up. They will go to court.
The studios, unlike publishers, tend to fight these things.
They do fight,
and I think most of them are successful in fighting. So I think that and we have several more of these stories, but I want to take a break in between the "he stole my ideas" stories, and the next issue that we want to talk about also sort of relates to the political stuff that's been going on in this country and yours. About hate speech. And I was actually quoted in this article by the Society of Human Resource Management.
I was looking at this just before we started recording. I was going down, so. Attorney Donna Borman told, wow, that's Donna. She's famous. Fabulous.
Peter, I got quoted in 4 articles in the past week. So
Neat. Oh,
but this was the only one that really affected, I think, free speech issues, because it is something that comes up a lot in my practice. People say, well, what about my free speech? So I just want to emphasize, this article is about whether if you are doing hate speech or hateful speech or just something upsetting to your boss on social media, can you be fired for it? There are states that do have laws that say you can't be fired for legal off-duty activities, but even those laws have exceptions. And if it's something that, for instance, shows that you have a propensity to discriminate against a particular group, whether it be men, women, black, Muslim, whatever, vegans. We've talked about this. Vegan could be considered a religion under U.S. law. It's true. It is true.
It is true. What about a vegan who's an atheist?
Well, see, no, because what the religious discrimination laws protect in this country are basically sincerely held personal beliefs. And so if you are an ethical vegan, as opposed to just a health vegan, ethical vegans are probably protected under religious discrimination laws.
I'm so relieved.
Yes.
I'm actually a protected species now. Gosh.
Yes, you are. So yes, and under U.S. law, an ethical vegan is probably protected.
So if you hurt my feelings, I could possibly prosecute you.
Well, you can't be fired for being a vegan, I think. An ethical vegan. You could be fired for
settlement
being a health vegan who just tries to annoy everyone with your dietary suggestions. But you can't be fired just for being a vegan and, believing that it's wrong to eat animals.
Interesting.
So there you have it. But anyhow, going back to hate speech. So even the laws, even the states, and Florida is not one of those states that has laws protecting people from being fired for legal off-duty activity, have exceptions for things like if your speech or whatever you're doing shows that you're unfit for your job. So things like hate speech toward other ethnic groups and stuff like that, not good. You can be fired. And I just wanted to say that because I think this is really important, and people get very excited. Yep. People are very excited and agitated after the election. So just be very careful what you say. There are also some states that have laws protecting you for being fired for your political beliefs. But again, once it crosses the line into hate speech, probably not.
Okay.
The next story I thought was really odd, but and it's kind of I think it's a warning to people because Facebook shut down a bookstore's page with no warning. It's called what is it?
Oak Park
BookBeat
Bookstore.
Well, it's called BookBeat.
Oh, right, yeah.
And yes, it's in Oak Park. It's called BookBeat. And Facebook said that they shut it down over a claim that it violated intellectual property rights held by another company. Well, the bookstore's held its name for 35 years, and they've had the Facebook page for over 10 years. And what happened, I guess, is that another company sent Facebook a takedown notice, and they just took it down.
Yeah.
And that's really shocking. It was a claim of a trademark and a copyright that came out of, where was it? It was Sweden or something.
Yeah, Bonnier apparently. But there's some dispute as to whether this was the real cause or not. I mean, this is the thing. You never can get to the bottom of it because, Facebook, private company, they can do what the hell they want. They're an oligarchy. I mean, the internet mostly is run now by, what is it? Facebook, Amazon, Google, and that's it. And if Facebook decide that, for reasons best known to themselves, there's no judge or jury in this, remember, that they're going to pull you, they're going to yank you, you're gone, you're disappeared, you're down the memory hole, gone. Now, if you are an independent bookstore, as Oak Park is, and you need your Facebook page pretty bloody much, actually, to survive competition from all the mega bookstores and the ebook thing and Amazon, of course, and suddenly your virtual shop window in the world disappeared overnight. I mean, how appalling is that? What's your legal recourse? Probably nothing.
Very little. So they've got lawyers looking into it, but that's very upsetting to hear. I think Facebook should have done a better job of investigating the issue and talking to both sides to find out what was going on before they just unilaterally shut him down.
Unilaterally, and you know what? This is the face of justice in the future, and this is the problem of living in an oligarchy. There will be many more instances like this. It's got free speech issues. It's got it's got corruption issues all over it. I'm terribly worried by this, and I think actually, Facebook is the elephant in the room. It's so big, and it is a really powerful marketing medium. You cannot ignore Facebook, but it's still ultimately it's a private company, and they can do what they want.
Hi, this is Jeffrey Archer, and I'm delighted to have been on Litopia, a great program, and I hope it will help my book, The Sins of the Father, which is in every good bookshop right now.
So the next story that we have is yet another person, and this is one of my favorites, Stephen King. He is getting sued supposedly for stealing his Dark Tower lead character. And I've read the Dark Tower series, and his lead character is named Roland Deschain.
Oh, yeah.
And they're saying that this is actually an unnamed plaintiff suing him, saying that he stole a character, Reston Dane, from the comic series The Rook. And the interesting part about this is that apparently Stephen King is a fan of the comic series The Rook. So yeah. I guess it at least has some plausibility in there.
Well, if Stephen King is going to go into the dock and give evidence, I don't know, but he will be entertaining. I would definitely watch that on television. The thing is about Mr. King, of course, he did a lot of his best writing while totally, absolutely under the influence of all kinds of chemical substances. And he's gone on record and said that he actually doesn't remember writing some books at all. He just doesn't remember.
I wouldn't say that his best writing was done under the influence, because I think his best writing was his early stuff, and then his later stuff, I think, he definitely writes better sober, in my opinion. But The Dark Tower definitely was a strange series.
I can just see the cross-examination, can't you? I said, so Mr. King, did you read this book, The Rook? Oh, I can't remember. Did you? When did you start to write your book, The Dark Tower? Oh, I can't remember. What was the name of the lead character in your book, The Dark Tower? I can't remember. Oh God!
It's possible, although he says that I think when he talks about the Dark Tower, it was an idea that he had many years ago, and then it was something that he started. He had set aside when he was a young author and started writing again years later, and it's a long series. And he says it's based off a poem by Robert Browning called "Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came." So we'll see. We'll keep you posted. I suspect this will go nowhere as usual.
It's going to go nowhere. It's going to go nowhere.
Nobody expresses ideas like Stephen King. I think that, and since it's not the idea but the expression of the idea, I suspect he will be very successful in this. Another story of a supposed theft is Gary Goldman, who worked on some films like Total Recall and Big Trouble in Little China, is suing Walt Disney for stealing his ideas and designs for Zootopia. Mm-hmm. He says that he actually pitched the idea of Zootopia as an animated feature to Mandeville Films, and 9 years later pitched it to Disney production executive Brigham Taylor, and both pitches were turned down, and he says the film is substantially similar.
Well, it's a toughie. I mean, this is, presumably this is a guy who's fairly sophisticated, because you get the impression a lot of these lawsuits are from very unsophisticated people indeed, and they're really just chancing it. And you do wonder really why and how some lawyers get involved, actually, because, the chances of success are so slim. Well, this particular person obviously is an experienced, sophisticated producer, and he had a reasonable expectation that his ideas wouldn't be stolen, I suppose. And hopefully, when he went through this pitch process, it still does happen a little bit, the verbal pitch, hopefully he had sort of documentation and things were, backed up and.
But even with documentation, Tess Gerritsen, is sued over the film Gravity, and it is really, really, really similar to one of her books. And she had pitched the story, and she lost. So, which I found really shocking. I mean, I thought that was pretty blatant. And,
it is blatant. We've had exactly the same thing here in the UK with the BBC, of all things. We featured an author a year or two ago whose ideas were obviously lifted lock, stock, and barrel for a BBC series because he was pitching it to the BBC, but he was pitching it to a different part of the BBC. It clearly does happen. It's shameful and disgraceful, but it does happen. And to be honest, there's not that much you can do other than trying to heap shame and opprobrium on the party who has actually stolen your work. Sometimes you can push and push and push and push. There's a very famous case, wasn't there? A few years ago with, I can't remember the guy's name now, Art Brookwald, I think.
Yes.
That was a very famous case, and it probably set a precedent. But my God, I think he had to push for probably a decade or so until he finally got satisfaction. And it's very depressing, actually, but it's very depressing for, people like me, agents, because ultimately that's what we do. We bring people with ideas and obviously, as you say, the ability to express those ideas, which is really when the ideas start to have some protection. We bring people together who've got those ideas and the people who consume them, the producers or the publishers or whoever else who can take them to market. And that's how we make our income. We hopefully look after the interests of the creative person and we do a successful deal. And then hopefully the whole thing just works and it goes on to be a very successful book or a very successful film, television series or whatever. And if you can have one party say, well, actually, we're not going to play by the rules anymore. Yeah, we like that idea, but we're just going to take it. One party sort of breaks the rules like that in a flagrant way. It's sort of putting two fingers up to the entire business, the entire profession. And it's disgraceful.
Well, and you're going to, if you engage in that kind of practice, discourage people from pitching to you. So you're going to run out of ideas eventually if you give the two fingers to creative people because they're not going to want to deal with you anymore. So I think ultimately that is a strategy that is a failing strategy, but we're seeing it more and more. And one lawsuit that I'm really glad is over because I love the show and I like the song. We covered this story about Big Bang Theory's song "Soft Kitty." This song "Soft Kitty"
you were going on
up.
about this a few weeks ago.
Yes,
yeah.
It's a song that supposedly Sheldon's mother used to sing to him when he was upset or sick. And so people in the cast sing it to him sometimes when he needs comforting.
Oh,
and
lovely.
It was concerning to me because the rhyme that they're saying it was plagiarized was actually very similar. However, a judge has dismissed the case, but not because of the lack of similarity, but because the daughters of the author of the rhyme have failed to establish that they own a valid copyright. So
interesting.
There's no determination that it wasn't lifted, just that the people suing didn't own the copyright. I assume
so they
there will
didn't
be
really
appeals.
have standing. That's what he's saying. You don't have standing to sue. Interesting.
Yes. So I mean, and that's I guess a problem when families of authors have to sue. You have to make sure that you do have those rights that have passed to you.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the issue. I'm sure we'll see more of it, and I'm sure it will continue to be in the show here, and we'll keep you posted. And another brief follow-up, and this is kind of a weird happy ending to a story. We've talked about the lawsuit between the Faulkner estate and Woody Allen over Midnight in Paris, the movie, where they sued over one line, which is "the past is not dead. Actually, it's not even past." You know who said that? Faulkner. And he was right, and I met him too. I ran into him at a dinner party, and there was a lawsuit over this, and they deservedly lost. But the follow-up is interesting because the lawyer who represented, I guess, Woody Allen in the case is also a documentary filmmaker. And so after that, she has I guess, gotten together with the Faulkner estate, and she's going to do a documentary about
It's all very
Faulkner.
weird, this, actually, Donna. I mean, I can't make head or tail of this. I mean, first of all, the film itself, in my view, probably Woody Allen's best film, certainly in recent decades. Did you see it?
I did. Yes, it was
Did you
very
enjoy
good.
it? I thought it was
I did.
lovely. A really nice little film. Totally enjoyed
Yes.
it. Midnight in Paris. If you haven't seen it, go and see it now.
It was very good.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on Netflix or something, but you can find it somewhere, I'm sure. Really sweet portrayal. Owen Wilson is somewhat sort of confused, down-in-the-mouth writer, and suddenly overnight he gets transported back, every American's fantasy, back into Paris of the beau monde, 1920s and all the rest of it. And you have this extraordinary, I'm going to count the words now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 words. 10 words. Owen Wilson spoke from a book by Faulkner. And Faulkner's estate, the guy who runs Faulkner's estate, has sued on that basis, that 10 words were used from an entire book. I find it baffling that the case was ever brought.
The judge was too.
Yeah,
Apparently,
he was.
the
He said
judge.
something, didn't he?
Yes, the judge seemed very, very puzzled. He said, "How Hollywood's flattering and artful use of literary allusion as a point of litigation, not celebration, is beyond this court's comprehension."
Yeah.
So the judge was puzzled and threw it out.
He said the court has viewed Midnight in Paris, read the book Requiem for a Nun, which is where these lines occur, and is thankful the parties did not ask the court to compare The Sound and the Fury with Sharknado, he wrote. And you don't often get humour from judges, but sometimes you do, and sometimes it's good. And that was good.
You can tell when the judge is really irked
Yeah, totally. It was a complete waste of time. I'm amazed.
when they're mocking your case.
Yeah, I'm amazed that Kaplan, who's the guy who sued, the trustee, I'm amazed that he didn't get both parties' costs awarded against him, actually. And then
It possibly did happen.
Well, then it goes on, and I, actually halfway through reading this account, I thought, this has got to be some kind of weird publicity stunt, actually. I mean, what on earth is this about? As you say, the attorney for the other side then sort of said, well, I'm actually a documentary filmmaker, should we do something? And this guy Kaplan said, yeah, okay, let's do it. I don't know. It's very strange. There's just something we don't know about this. There's something not quite right about it. One end of it or the other. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's not that unusual for, I have opposing counsel that I'm friendly with and, sometimes, get invited to speak at events, by them and stuff. So
yeah,
it's not that
like
unusual.
opposing counsel. It's like you getting together with the guy who is the client of the opposing counsel and then deciding to go into business together or do a podcast together or something like that. It
does happen. It does happen.
Yeah.
I've actually had, people who have been on the other side of the table from me, refer me business and stuff. So it does happen.
That's very flattering, isn't it? It's nice.
It is. So it happened. Look, being a lawyer is a profession. It's just our job. So it's not like we hate the other side. So yeah, they ran into each other. Well, she invited them to speak at an event, and then they developed a relationship,
Wow.
professional relationship. So that was where it is. Anyhow, it's kind of a good story for a change.
Yeah.
That out of all of that grief came and a very silly lawsuit came something good. So who knows? Some of these stories can turn around and maybe turn into something positive. It's always good to see. That's all for this edition of The Debriefer. If you have questions about using the law in writing or a story you want us to cover, don't forget to tell me about it by hitting the email button on the Debriefer show page. Join us again in 2 weeks, more or less, for more about writing and the law.
Hello there, this is Craig Murray, former British ambassador, dissident and author of Murder in Samarkand, and you're listening to Radio Litopia.